Hey guys, and welcome to a very special Saturday night edition of Monte and Pharaoh. I am Benny Scala, the one and only Playa, and with me is I'm going to call him the Bob Costas, a professional wrestling interviewers, the one and only Mike Monte. Mike, how are you, my friend?
Glad to be aboard, Benny. Thank you for the invite.
Oh yeah, absolutely, my pleasure. And we're also joined by Mike Messier. Mike is an accomplished writer, podcaster, artist, and actor. I always call him slash artist slash this slash that, in addition to being one of the most avid wrestling fans I've ever met. Mike, what's going on?
I'm here in Jacksonville, Florida. Happy to be with you and Mike Monte, and it's going to be a good evening. I'm looking forward to it and hearing the comments from the fans as we do this.
Never a bad night when you talk about wrestling. You got any snow in Jayville or no?
Absolutely none. I don't think it snowed here for 30 years. I've only been here for 5, but
Okay.
I think the city would shut down if it snowed an inch.
Yeah, I lived in Norfolk. Well, actually, I went on a job interview in 2017, and they had snow, and you could tell they were absolutely clueless how to handle the snow. It was like about 2 inches, but I was driving on the road. I thought I was driving on somebody's front lawn. I mean, they didn't know how to do it. So I guess it would be more the same. Be the same thing here in Newport Richey. I don't think it's snowed here since 1985.
Yeah, I don't miss the ice or the snow. But it's good to be here in Florida, and as you know, there's NXT shows that are coming around, and of course AEW comes through here quite often, and WWE as well. So it's a good state for wrestling.
Oh, absolutely. So, guys, the subject at hand this evening is the WWE Hall of Fame class of 2025. So far, 2 inductees have been announced, and we're going to discuss. That's why we're here. Any possible inductees, and I got a little slideshow prepared. So let me flash it up. First guy is already right. Paul Triple H Levesque, no brainer, right?
Yeah, of course. I mean, and it's just kind of funny because as much as I might have some issues with Vince McMahon Jr. or other people do, he never really promoted himself during these Hall of Fames. But if you remember last year at WrestleMania weekend, between Paul Heyman and Cody Rhodes, everybody was putting over Triple H, Michael Cole on commentary at WrestleMania. And this year, the very first inductee is Triple H himself. And so it's a little bit of a stylistic change. I guess Triple H wants a little more of that self-congratulatory rub than Vince did.
How about you, Monty?
This is a no-brainer, right?
It's 14-time champion.
Well, I was just thinking, like, who would have thought the McMahons would be controlling the United States at this point, with Linda becoming the head of education and Triple H becoming this icon? Is there any chance, since Vince is halfway cleared or a little more than halfway cleared, is there a chance Vince gets inducted this year?
Yeah, I mean, is it always a chance, right? Absolutely.
I was thinking that they might put Vince in next year, but it would, as we all get older, nothing's guaranteed. So, I mean, even Triple H, as great as he looks, and as a guy as Triple H is, he still has that heart condition. He's got the stent in his chest. So, I mean, I think it's fine that Triple H is going in. If you look at like the year 2000, his matches with The Rock, his matches with Mick Foley, just in that calendar year alone, he is a no-brainer, a first ballot Hall of Famer. So congratulations to Triple H. I just think it's an interesting stylistic change that Triple H is not afraid to kind of be celebrated, where Vince Jr. Was not so much like that when it came to the Hall of Fame.
Right.
I got to say, Mike, that's a great point with Triple H and his health, right? Because he did have a serious problem, and he did take major damage to his heart that I'm assuming did not recover. I think what did he say? His what is it called? Fraction, when your heart's pumping blood, was like under 3%, which is,
oh geez,
isn't good, right? So, again, I'm sure that he's, if everyone knows your heart can, you can live perfectly fine with your heart at like 50% capacity. Your heart doesn't even work at 100% capacity all the time, but he certainly did take damage. Whether his heart is recovered or not is to be, be imagined, but I would assume not, considering.
He's got the thing in his chest, I believe. They put it in, and once you get that, at least with our modern technology, that's there for the rest of your life.
Right.
So, I mean, I've always respected Triple H as a worker, and I've never met the guy, but from what I gather, at least I think he's always had a respect for the workers, the wrestlers, because he was one, because he worked his way up through Killer Kowalski's school and IWF in New England, and he was in WCW. We all know his story, but basically Triple H was a full-time wrestler, and I think because of that, he's always respected every wrestler more to some extent than Vince Jr. ever did.
Right. We obviously never see him back in the ring again, right? As far as any kind of in-ring action, that's never happening.
He put his boots in the ring, I think, at WrestleMania 2022, whatever number that was. He started the show. That it was one of the 2-day WrestleManias. He put his boots in the ring, and I think he did a little speech, and that was it. So his last match, oddly enough, was a tag team match with Nakamura in Japan, and I don't remember if Triple H's side won or lost the match, but apparently Triple H's last match was not even recorded because they didn't know it would be his last match at the time.
Wow,
Sure.
I didn't even know that. Mike, you brought up another interesting point about the respect issue. I think what's happening now is that wrestling has become more of a TV program yet again, right? The house shows are diminishing quickly. And I was just thinking about that the other day. The more and more these wrestlers don't get their in-ring time. Working and practicing during the weekday in a ring isn't the same as working in a crowd and trying things out like they used to do in house shows. So, I'm predicting the product will start to slip fairly quickly at this point, as long as they continue not to do house shows.
That's it. That's an interesting point. I mean, that's a real interesting point, and I hadn't thought about that. I mean, I would say that in the women's division, especially, Nia Jax throwing the worst chair shots. What was that at the Survivor Series and the War Games?
Is that what they were? Is that what that was?
Yeah, and even Bailey, and Bailey's very good for the most part, but Bailey was calling elbows like loud as John Cena, elbow. And so, I mean, I've noticed with the women's wrestlers, and I'm not trying to pick on them because I have a lot of respect for the women's wrestlers these days, and that Mildred Burke Queen of the Ring movie's coming out, and that's exciting. But some of these women, I think they need Fit Finlay to come back and retrain them because they're playing very soft. But maybe that's like Mike Monte said, a lack of house shows to get your reps in,
You both are very well versed in pro wrestling. I got to ask you, since you guys are taking shots at Nia Jax, I looked at it another way. I looked at it as the people in the ring were not allowing her to execute what she was supposed to. Naomi, if you looked at that match, was like cringing at the chair coming, which obviously. You got the chair. I don't really, the more and more I looked at that match, because I was, I had heard both of you mention it before, and I looked at it, I'm like, I'm not so sure it was her fault. I have to say it might have been the other wrestlers' faults in that ring. What do you think?
Well, I mean, you got to be able to sell it. And if you can't cower before you get a chair shot. You got to take it. So yeah, if she's not taking it, yeah, then I guess that would be, I never really thought of that. That's a good point.
Just as a guy, like you guys may or may not know, I wrestled a grand total of 13 matches on the independent circuit way back when. And I can just say from my limited experience and just being a longtime wrestling fan, mostly, once a wrestler is deemed to not be trustworthy, to be reckless, like a Goldberg or like a Nia Jax, I would have to think that the Baileys, the Charlotte Flairs, they all go into a ring with Nia Jax kind of with some apprehension and maybe even well-earned fear because they've seen that she's injured so many of her opponents. So giving her your body is not something they necessarily want to do or feel comfortable doing, but because
you might not get it back.
Right. Because she's the Rock's cousin, you're not going to get Nia fired if you complain about her, but they just, Bailey and the others, Naomi, they might just not trust her, and so that comes through in the performance, the matches.
That's another great point, right? Trust is a big thing, but then I guess we come full circle. How can Nia Jax get better if you don't give her enough in-ring, in front of crowd time? You
got a guy like Tito Santana, who we had for our 200th episode, and I mean, the guy was wrestling on average for years, 250 matches a year. What do these guys do? Maybe, 25 or 30. How can you hone your craft when you have like 1/10 of the reps that the guys back in the 80s and 90s had? I think that's a good point. How good can you be? You're not getting the you're practicing a little bit, but you're not getting that in-ring action night after night after night. That's going to make you, really, really perfect your craft.
I gotta say this too, is I've always been a believer in the Monday Night Wars back in the day. That what kept the WWE alive were the house shows, going town to town. Again, I understand the product has become different, but I have to believe at some point this is going to end up hurting this product.
I would say that the WWE, if you see the photograph, that's my background for the people on YouTube watching the Monte and the Pharaoh YouTube channel. I go to these NXT house shows that are in really small venues. Like in Jacksonville, it's the National Guard Armory, maybe 400 people. Lakeland, Gainesville has a nice venue that's probably 400, 500 seats. Martin Luther King Jr. Facility down there in Gainesville, Florida. And what they're basically, I'm sure that the WWE is not making money, or maybe they're breaking even by doing these little shows, but they're trying to produce a facsimile, I think, more for the benefit of the young wrestlers than for the benefit of the fans.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to say, hey, wrestlers, you're being spoon-fed the best gym in the world. I'm sure that the NXT gym is probably one of the best gyms in the world for athletes. I'm sure that they're getting the best dietitians, the best injury recovery help, et cetera, et cetera. But when you go to these NXT house shows, the wrestlers are working security. They're running a camera. They're basically trying to give them the very best facsimile of the old Memphis territory, or the old this territory, or the old that territory. So I support that, because I do feel like you can't recreate the past. You can't make a time machine and Marty McFly the current NXT wrestlers back to the 1950s or the 1960s and introduce them to Dory Funk Jr. But if you make this facsimile of what a territory system used to be, I think it does help.
And you can see it in the product too. Real quick, guys, I'm just looking at the chat. Islamic State says, what do you think of people calling Noseman racist because he doesn't book black wrestlers well?
Is that Triple H? Is Triple H?
Yeah, I guess that would be Noseman racist. Yeah.
Well, I always go back to WrestleMania 19, not to harbor on it, but I mean, the whole thing with Booker T was a disgraceful angle that Booker T didn't walk out of WrestleMania 19 with the title belt over Triple H. And there's another little meme of Triple H mocking Mark Henry. And, when Triple H was doing that, he was probably in his late 20s or 30s, and people mature. And I'm trying to think, I mean, if you think about it, Triple H did put over The Rock a bunch of times. And I mean, some people debate whether The Rock is black, but I mean, his father was billed as the first African-American tag team champion along with Tony Atlas. So I would consider Rock to be the first WWF World Heavyweight Champion back at Survivor Series 98. I wouldn't consider Kofi Kingston, no disrespect to him, but I never understood that whole angle where people were saying he was the first. That made no sense to me, because The Rock did it back in 98. But I don't know. I mean, I think Triple H is pretty evolved. Do I know if he's a racist or not? I don't think he is, but I've never met the guy, so I can't say.
Right.
I would have to think, as a wrestler, though, right? Back then, and look where he is now, is you have to keep yourself over, man. It's all about making money, right? So it's like, screw it. If I could make sure that I'm going to win that WrestleMania against Booker T, I'm going to make sure it happens, right? I mean, there was a point that it was Monday Night Triple H for a very long time, So
he really, I think he really, I mean, as great as he was, I really think he was jammed down our throats for a long time.
Yeah.
I can understand that. I definitely can understand that.
I'm reading the comments too. RJ Hudson says, racist, it's just some guys offer nothing and you need to come up with something to get themselves on TV. It's interesting. I mean, I would say this. It does seem that Triple H still wants to get himself over. Like, you've seen a million photographs of him with his arm around some NXT champion pointing to them. And it's almost become a cliche. Even when Triple H got this induction from The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels, Stephanie kind of did the pose where she was taking Triple H's spot with the finger. I don't know. I mean, but the real deal is that I'm sure Triple H will be the semifinalist at the Hall of Fame to Michelle McCool. I mean, she's going to main event this thing, right?
Oh, don't even start with that. But here's the other thing, though, guys. When you're a competitor, whether it's a predetermined sport or an athlete, when your time is up, especially with someone like Triple H, you still want to compete, right? You still want to be in the limelight, right? You still want to get your flowers. I mean, I think the day any of us stop competing is the day we're going to die. So it's like, I know people get mad, but it's like, hey, you know what? I want to be that guy no matter what, as long as I could be that guy. I mean, the icon, or at least my icon, Hulk Hogan, he made a living out of that, right? It's like he did not want to give up that spot. And do I blame him? Absolutely not.
No, I agree. All right, how about speaking of Michelle McCool? I would never have voted for her. I wouldn't have even thought about her.
All right, can I just start this real quick? Last year, Stacy Keibler got in?
I think it was 2 years ago for Stacey.
2 years ago. Jimmy was irate. He couldn't believe it. He thought it was a disgrace. And in my mind, right, Stacy Keibler is more well known than, again, not a shot at you, Benny, but Ivan Koloff. It's old. No, what I mean is, I know for a long time you've wanted Ivan to be in the Hall of Fame, which he does deserve, right? But Stacy Keibler is a huge name that brings attention to the product. This is a business. So, yeah, did Stacy Keibler mean more to the wrestling world than Ivan Koloff? Absolutely not. If you went down the street and asked 10 people who Ivan Koloff is, I'd say 9 of them would have no clue. But if you asked who Stacy Keibler was, probably 9 out of 10 would. And this is a business, and people seem to forget about this. And as time goes on, these older guys are getting forgotten. Just like we, when we were younger, we didn't, we weren't looking at, I don't know, Ernie the Cat Lad or whatever else you want to throw out there, right? It's like we were in the here and now. They're in the here and now. That being said, Michelle McCool, this makes no sense to me whatsoever, and it's not fair, and it's not right, and it's not even this is lick the Undertaker's balls. That's what this is.
Yeah, I mean, she did have that wonderful angle with DDP, right, where DDP was stalking her. Oh, that was the Undertaker's other blonde wife with the tattoo on his neck, Sarah. I thought Michelle McCool, to give her respect, I did think she was very talented. She looked very athletic when she was first doing. I think she got in with a Tough Enough thing, didn't she? Or was it the Divas Search? I think it was the Divas Search actually for Michelle. But I always thought that she seemed to be too intelligent to be a wrestler because she seemed like she was I thought she was studying medicine or something at the time.
She was a school teacher in Palatka, Florida. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I think she's a very elegant woman. I mean, hey, look, if I had 3 wives, she'd be a great third wife. So credit to the Undertaker for the score, but why not put Laycool in? I mean, that might put the pillow on the bullet a little bit because she was kind of mostly known for Laycool, which was the WWE's knockoff of the Beautiful People, Velvet Sky and Angelina Love. But I mean, I think it's like Mike Monte said, this is a Undertaker reach around move. Undertaker's been a good soldier. He's been a good ambassador. He's stuck by Vince. He does the podcast with Trump. And so Undertaker's on team WWE legacy, whatever you want to call it. So they give him the rub and they put Michelle in. So it's a version of nepotism, or look out for your friends.
Yeah, but don't you think that the wrestling fan, there will be pushback on this, and it ends up being more actually in social media more nasty than expected?
I think that it might be, but it won't stop any fan who takes the time to go on X or Instagram and make some type of meme or thumbs up some type of anti-Michelle McCool meme they're not going to not watch WrestleMania this year because of that. It's not going to stop them from watching WrestleMania or from buying a WWE action figure, or
That's true.
they're not going to say, I refuse to buy this WWE ice cream bar in the name of Michelle McCool and her overhyped Hall of Fame induction. I mean, let's face facts. We all complain about wrestling, but we still watch it. So there you go.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. Jimmy and I were talking earlier today, and you know, these arguments happen everywhere. I mean, in baseball. I mean, when Harold Baines got elected to the Hall of Fame, I went ballistic, you know, because you had guys like Munson and Mattingly or Andy Pettit not in, and you have Harold. Who the hell is Harold Baines? But Jimmy's told me something that
Wait, Benny, let's not get too deep into this. But again, I've had this discussion with you and Jimmy, and you guys keep on forgetting that part of the being in the Hall of Fame is a long-term career. And the guys you keep picking at did not have a long-term. They do not hit the criteria.
Yeah, but then you're the Hall of Long or the Hall of Good. You got to be the Hall of Great. I mean, Harold Baines was not a great ball player. He stuck around for a long time.
Stats are Hall of Fame worthy, right? Because he has it. Because
I don't think so. I mean,
he hits all the points.
He was good enough to stick around in the major leagues for like 21 years, and he played at a decent level, but he never was even in the top 25 in an MVP voting. He was the same with Don Sutton, who pitched for the Dodgers forever. He won 300 games. I think he won 20 games once. Yeah, he won the 15.
300 games is the criteria. This is what I keep saying.
That one. Right. No, I agree. But again, the guy was he a great pitcher? Maybe borderline, but he had 120-win season.
And look,
a guy like,
you know what? Like Jimmy
and
you like to talk about All-Star. You know, again, they play in New York, they play in Los Angeles. It's like the presidential. That's why the popular vote doesn't work in a presidential race, right? Because it's like there's many more Yankee fans than there were St. Louis Cardinal fans, for example, or Montreal Expos fans. So of course Thurman Munson's going to get in the All-Star game 8 times or whatever.
I don't use that as a metric. I use like Gold Gloves, MVPs, batting titles. I don't give a shit about the All-Star game. It's a popularity contest.
Right.
Gentlemen, can we put aside this fake baseball nonsense and get back to the real issue of professional?
Well, I was going to say real quick, Jimmy told me that Jethro Tull and Iron Maiden were not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I had no idea.
I mean, here's the thing, guys. I mean, it's all subjective. I mean, the reality is you could say music. The Black Crowes were nominated this year. I was shocked. That's like my favorite band, but they had one album with top 10 singles, their first one, the Black Crowes, back in 1990, and they have not been commercial. They've been a great touring band, but a lot of it is subjective. I mean, even if people say, like I was watching Monte and the Pharaoh, and they had on a guest recently, and I think it was actually Nikita Koloff. It was a show from 2 years ago. And you asked Nikita what his Mount Rushmore Hall of Fame or Mount Rushmore of wrestlers would be. And I think he said Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes, and the Road Warriors. And that's like a great Jim Crockett Promotions 1987 Mount Rushmore, right? But where's Rico Dozan? Where's Gorgeous George? Where's Hulk Hogan? So my point, guys, is it's very subjective, especially with pro wrestling, where even when people argue who is the greatest pro wrestler, what does that mean exactly? Is that
But let me ask you this, Mike. Shouldn't there be some sort of criteria? For example, did you ever main event a WrestleMania? Did you ever main event a pay-per-view? Did you ever main event a house show? Some of these, there has to be some sort of criteria. And, Michelle McCool, as beautiful as she is, and she was a good wrestler, she was a mid-carder. She was filler. And it's like, I don't know how you give her a Hall of Fame induction. It makes no sense.
Well, she was half of the women's champion because her and Lay Cool, they broke the belt in half. And I mean, look, like I said, I think it's an Undertaker thing, just like you do. But I think for her brief 3 or 4 year tenure, I thought she was very good.
Well,
and
that's the other thing too, longevity. There was a lot. How long was she around?
She was 5 years. I think it was 3 or 4 years, and I think in the women's division, and Triple H said this when they inducted her, because I watched Triple H announce her get in, right? And basically he was saying that Michelle was part of the transitional period going from the bimbo type to the athletic Charlotte Flair type. So she was like a tweener between Tori Wilson and Charlotte Flair. Like Michelle
So
McCool was
she's
the
getting the
tweener.
credit as being that transitional wrestler that moved it from the Divas division to the women's division.
Part of it. She's getting part of that. She's basically Triple H is saying that she was, part of the transitional period from the bimbos, the hot bimbos like the Stacys and the Tori Wilson, who played their part as the hot bimbos, even though they weren't bimbos in real life, and into the modern day athlete that we see with Charlotte or Bailey or Mercedes Moné. So, I mean, I'm not too worried about it, guys, because I'll say this. I mean, to me, I get more upset about the guys like Ox Baker and Ivan Koloff, and I made a list of other guys that I think could go in this year and should go in. I get more upset about the people that aren't in than the people that are in, because, back in, I think it was 2009 when Coco Beware got in, a lot of people had a riot about Coco Beware getting in because they thought he was a prelim guy, but this guy did a lot of great stuff in Memphis. He was part of a cool tag team called the PYT Express with Norville Austin and World Class Wrestling. I just think that there's a case to be made for pretty much every wrestler. And as far as the main event thing goes, Mike, I get what you're saying, but the thing is, Baron Mikhail Sakula never main evented a pay-per-view or WrestleMania, but he was inducted in one of the early Hall of Fames, because I think one thing that's good about the WWE Hall of Fame is that they have like different levels. There's like the jobber level, like the mid-card guy level, the manager level, the dead guy. There's always a dead guy that gets in every year. There's usually a woman that gets in every year. So
right.
I don't think you have to be if it was strictly main eventers, where's King Kong Bundy? He was the first guy to challenge for the WWF title at a WrestleMania. He should be in there.
I agree. And look, I understand, like, they have to, like, you can't put her in and not have China in at this point. The whole porn thing, and Triple H was saying, hey, you know what, we have to be careful because these kids are watching wrestling, and then they see this lady China gets put in, and then they type her up, and the first thing comes up is one night in China, and that's not good for the organization. I think at a point you when you start putting Michelle McCool in, and again, Mike, you bring up some great points. I think there's other women that need to be in here and need to be put in the Hall of Fame, and China should have gotten the nod if you're going to go with Michelle McCool. That's all I've got to say.
Right.
Well, China technically is in with DX because they did list China with DX, so technically she's in.
Yeah, I know, but that's it's different, I guess, in a way, in my opinion, anyway. And then again, to be honest with you, maybe they're just running out of people to put in.
I have actually got a list, guys. Would you guys indulge me that I want to go through my list?
Sure.
And see what you guys think?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, this one's been said before, but I added a little spin to it. Cyndi Lauper, David Wolf or Dave Wolf, and the wrestling album as an entirety, as a piece of art. Because Cyndi Lauper, to me, I can't believe she's still not in the Hall of Fame. I think she inducted Wendy Richter. But Cyndi, she's just as responsible as Hulk Hogan or anybody else for the Rock and Wrestling connection, the war to settle the score, the brawl to settle it all the things on MTV. For a period of time, Cyndi Lauper was just as big as Madonna. And for the fans of today, that would be like Miley Cyrus or maybe not quite as big as Taylor Swift, but basically that type of thing. As far as a pop diva, Cyndi Lauper was up there with Madonna. And her endorsement of WWF really put them into a different stratosphere with the fans. So I just think it's a shame that Cyndi Lauper, her boyfriend at the time, David Wolf, was one of the guys behind the wrestling album. And I'm talking about the one with the Land of 1,000 Dances. Nikolai Volkov sang on that one. Our buddy Nikita Breznikov's buddy, Nikolai Volkov, sang Cara Mia. Mean Gene Okerlund.
What a great job he did, too.
Yeah, Mean Gene Okerlund sang Tutti Frutti, Grab Them Cakes.
If I can interrupt, not only is Lauper not in the WWE Hall of Fame, she also isn't in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which both are a travesty. Now, I will say this. I know that supposedly the WWE asked Cyndi Lauper and she refused, but on our Twitter account 2 years ago, we asked Cyndi Lauper and she responded, and she said she was never asked.
Well, I think that's very interesting. And I think it would be maybe it had something to do with Vince. Who knows? Because now with a different regime, maybe they'll make that offer. If they did it before, maybe they'll make it now. Maria does like my Hall of Fame picks, Maria Davis. So I'll continue. While we're celebrating Triple H, we might as well throw The Rock in the mix. I mean, I think The Rock is officially not. Does The Rock get honored yet or not?
No,
Like,
not yet.
Okay, so I mean, he'll another reason for The Rock to trot himself out on modern wrestling, but The Rock, of course, my buddy Ox Baker, Ivan Koloff. Speaking of women, I think this might be an interesting choice. I have a few women here. The Nitro Girls. What about Kimberly Page and the Nitro Girls? You know, you could put Shawn Michaels' wife in then because she was a Nitro Girl. But Spice and Sharmell Sullivan was a Nitro Girl. She's the Queen Sharmell in the Hall of Fame. But I think the Nitro Girls could be an interesting pick.
I honestly would have went with the Nitro Girls before Michelle McCool. I would have been happier with that pick. That's a legitimate
I got way
pick.
more entertained by them than I ever got entertained by Michelle McCool.
I would love to see. Spice was always my favorite Nitro Girl, but I just think that they were very entertaining. I'm kind of surprised that WWE never did a version of the Nitro Girls in the years since. Here's another couple of women that I think are overlooked in wrestling annals. I know Jeff Jarrett works for AEW now, so this probably would have worked better a couple of years ago when he was with the WWE. But Christine Teeny Jarrett was Jeff Jarrett's grandmother, and she was one of the very first women pro wrestling promoters.
Legendary promoter in Memphis.
Yes. So I would like to see, if Jarrett ever comes back.
Dude, but if we're running a WWE and you're at the table and you're throwing that at me, I'm like, yeah, Mike, that's not happening. Move on.
No, I agree with Mike, but I agree with both Mikes because does she deserve to be in? Yes. But is anybody, if we ask 100 people and randomly in walking the street, maybe one person will have heard of Christine Jarrett.
And you're going fast, Mike. I want to go back to Ox Baker.
Okay.
Now, Ox Baker, as a wrestling fan, when I saw him on Escape from New York, totally flipped out because I was an Ox Baker guy. But if you again, I want to act like we're at a table. You're presenting to us. We're running the company. I'm saying no to Ox Baker also. Would not say no to Ivan Koloff at all. I would definitely go with Ivan Koloff, but I would not give the nod to Ox Baker. I felt Ox Baker, though he had a influence on the industry, I don't think he to me he's a middle guy, but that's my call.
And I think it's one of those things, like I said, it's subjective. Had you been in the arena where I think it was Ernie the Big Cat Ladd was actually the baby face and Ox Baker's pounded him in the chest a million times and they have a riot. I think that was in Cleveland or something like that. It's on YouTube. But I think you might say, hey, man, this Ox Baker knew how to draw business. Or if you watch the Price is Right thing with Barb Barker and the movie that you just said, like I said, it's all very subjective. Ox was in the New England Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame by my buddy Joe Bruin, put him in, which Ox really coveted that. But, okay, so I said Ox Baker. Was there anything else I said that you wanted to debate a little bit?
You said Koloff. I think we're all in agreement that Koloff should have already been put in. Again, if people don't understand, from what I understand from talking to a lot of the guys, the reason Koloff isn't in, and it kind of doesn't make sense to me, but before superstar Billy Graham was given a title, Graham was in the WWE with Koloff, and they held up Vince McMahon Sr. for money. That's from my understanding, and that beef stayed on for a really long time. It doesn't make sense to me, though, because Koloff did wrestle Backlund. I don't know if Junior was in charge there, so that means that Senior was still okay with him, I'm assuming, but whatever.
Yeah, I think it was the story I heard was Koloff, Superstar Graham, and Big Cat Ernie Ladd were like the three top heels in New York, and they said, give us more money or none of us will show up or something like that. So I've heard that same story. As I mentioned earlier, there's always a thing with, we got to put a dead person in here. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but it always seems like, going back to when Eddie Guerrero got put in a few months after he died, I think that was in 2005 or 2006. But this year, unfortunately, there's some good choices for the recently deceased. You've got Psycho Sid Vicious, who was a two-time WWF champion, two-time WCW champion. He was an amazing presence. He wasn't the best technical wrestler, but as far as a look and as far as a crazy face, I mean, Sid was pretty impressive.
Absolutely.
And then, go ahead.
No, I would say I think he won a title twice in WCW and twice in WWE.
Yes.
Wherever Sid went, they gave him the title. The guy, if you made a wrestler, from scratch, Sid Vicious is the guy. You know what I mean? Definitely, he should be in the Hall of Fame, and I think that's happening in the next few years. But go ahead.
Here's one. I mean, here's the slam dunk that we didn't get last year. By the way, a few people have commented Missy Hyatt, which is an interesting choice, or Miss Elizabeth. That would be
Miss Elizabeth, yeah.
Miss Elizabeth, Mike, that's a great. Miss Elizabeth should be in the Hall of Fame, and she should be in before Michelle McCool.
It was a viewer, a commenter actually suggested that. I'm trying to find out who the commenter was.
That was Jason Moaning.
Right. And RJ Hudson said Missy Hyatt, so you'd have to have Michael Hayes induct her. And then, but the slam dunk for the recently deceased, at this point, it would be about a year and a half since he passed away, is the Fiend, Bray Wyatt. I would have no objection to that. He died at a young age, but he was the WWE World Champion, the lineage title, the Bruno belt. He was the champion. And I think for the short period of time that the wrestling world saw Bray Wyatt's stuff, I think he was great. So I have no problem with that.
So here's the Monty unpopular statement on this, and I'm sure
I know it's
99% of the people will say you're an idiot, but if you really think about it, I know I'm right. Number one, he wasn't around long enough, in my opinion. Number two, all his great thinking and out-of-the-box thinking was fantastic every time until he got into the ring, because it never worked in the ring. He was, to me, okay wrestler, was good on the mic, but every time they tried to give this guy the title, he couldn't carry it because the wrestling was unsustainable. And the Wyatt family did well. The Fiend was, in my opinion, was a total bust. And for anyone to say anything different, it's ridiculous. It was a bust. I hate to say it. And even the Bray Wyatt character died pretty quickly, that they had him in tag team matches with Matt Hardy as a tag team champion. So my belief is a lot of times people pass and they're remembered differently or better after they pass. Even when he came back, when he originally, first of all, the WWE signed him because they were afraid he was going to AEW. Okay, that was a panic move, in my opinion. When he came back, it was hot for a minute, and then it just died off. I hate to say it. I mean, look at the Wyatt sick. It's not working. This out of the box, putting on masks, wrestling and mask stuff doesn't work. Only my opinion, but understand why Mike would say that he thinks he could be in or should be in.
Well, I think it's similar to when Eddie Guerrero got in, and I'm actually surprised they didn't put Bray Wyatt in a year ago, because it just seemed like that could have been a way to segue into the Wyatt Six. But I think it's just one of those things, and I think, I've covered that. Benny and I have talked about it. Nikita Breznikov have talked about it. It's like we're getting older. The wrestling fans that are in their teens or they're even preteens, they see these guys like we used to see Nikita Koloff or Harley Race or something. You know what I mean? Like they're looking at these guys like they're gods. They're looking at Bray Wyatt or the way that they put over John Cena now, saying that he's the greatest of all time, which I thoroughly disagree with. But these younger people in their 20s or 30s, when they were watching John Cena when they were 10 or 15, they believe it. They believe that stuff.
Well, let me ask you, why do you not think that John Cena is the greatest of all time?
Because he was supposed to be the top babyface for about 10 years, and he was getting booed out of the arenas. And to me, that it doesn't matter if they cheer or boo as long as they make noise to an extent. But Steve Austin, as the 97, 98, 99 Stone Cold Steve Austin, when he was a babyface, he was a babyface. People cheered for him. People were going nuts. They were using the middle finger. When The Rock was a babyface, people cheered for him. When John Cena came in, I don't see anything that John Cena did personally or that even the business did, even the WWE. I don't think they did anything on John Cena's watch that was an improvement to any huge extent that happened that didn't happen before he came in.
Let me ask you this question. How long did Austin wrestle for in the WWE as Stone Cold Steve Austin? 4 years?
Well, he came in late 95, early 96.
Not as a ringmaster, Stone Cold Steve Austin, right?
Stone Cold started around April of 96, and he went until, was it WrestleMania 19 when he retired against The Rock, and then he did some.
So how many years is that, Mike?
That's like 5. That's
so you're talking 5 against 12. You know, eventually guys do burn out, and the usual wrestling way is, okay, the guy's burning out, turn him heel or turn them babyface, right? In this case, they stayed steady babyface with him all the way through, and now he's, you know, I certainly understand why a person would say John Cena is not the greatest of all time, but I certainly understand why people could say that John Cena is the greatest of all time. And I think the WWE has to give him that 17th title to solidify that, right? To make sure that everybody understands. Now, you have people out there saying Ric Flair wrestled in all these other organizations and he won different titles from other, and all Cena did was win in the WWE. Now people are talking about putting Cena and beating Joe Henry for his TNA title, which is utterly ridiculous. But my point is this. I don't know how you judge the greatest tag teams of all time, but if anyone would turn, and I'm not a fan of Bully Ray at all. In fact, I can't stand them. But the Dudley Boys, definitely, if any wrestling fan, if they said they were the greatest tag team of all time, you can't disagree with them, right? But if you just looked at teams that won titles all over in all these different organizations, then the Motor City Machine Guns are the greatest tag team of all time, which is utterly ridiculous in my opinion. But that's my 2 cents on that, Mike.
Yeah, I think like I said earlier, the greatest stuff, especially with pro wrestling, is so subjective. The way that I like to phrase things are, who are your favorites? Because you can't argue with personal favorites. No. I mean, if nobody asks, but if you were to say, well, Mike, who's your 4 favorites? Not talking to Mount Rushmore, but if I had to name 4 favorite singles wrestlers, I'd say Barry Windham, Brian Pillman, Ric Flair, and Magnificent Morocco. But I'm not going to claim that those 4 guys are more important than Rico Dozan, Gorgeous George, Inoki, Baba. You know what I mean? It's just it's an apple and an orange.
Well, they were more important than Mike Messier, right? I mean, that's what matters, right?
Yeah, when I was a kid, yeah. Speaking of which, Brian Pillman, oddly enough, was celebrated with a 2-disc DVD set. I think that came out around 2005, 2006, when the WWE was doing a great job with DVDs. And I thought when they made the DVD set of the Loose Cannon, I thought for sure that they would put him in the Hall of Fame that year, if nothing else, to promote the discs. But they did not. And that's been like 15 years at this point, and he's still not in. But now that they have Lexus King, his son, Brian Pillman Jr., is under contract to WWE, and he's doing quite well in NXT. Is now the time for the son to induct the father?
I can't argue with Brian Pillman being in the Hall of Fame.
No.
He's definitely deserving.
All right, good. And then let me think. So here's another, going back to the wrestling album stuff. Hulk Hogan had 4 or 5 different theme songs in his career. Eye of the Tiger, the NWO theme, but probably the one that people remember quite a bit is Real American. I Am a Real American, etc. I believe it's Rick Derringer. Isn't that the guy that recorded that?
That is correct, yes.
So in my opinion, Rick Derringer, even based on that one song, but I think he had a few other songs of the Rock and Wrestling Connection. I think Rick Derringer should go in on the heels of Real American, if nothing else.
I don't disagree. Go ahead, Benny. I'm sorry.
Didn't
Mean Gene sing one of his songs, Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo?
Yeah, on the wrestling album. Yeah,
that was Derringer.
Yeah. So I just think that, a lot. I think Jake Johnston, did he ever get in?
James Johnson?
No,
With-
not yet. Not yet.
Okay,
yet.
so I guess I'm just into the music tonight for whatever reason.
And a side note for people, that Real American was the U.S. Express's song in the beginning, right? If you have that album, that was their song. So I make fun of made fun of Rotundo and Barry for that. I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, on YouTube you can find a couple of matches of them coming out to the ring with that, and even on the wrestling album commentary, which I loved, Mean Gene Okerlund and Jesse Ventura doing commentary, and I think Vince as well. But Jesse Ventura says, "This is dedicated to me, all American Jesse the Body." No. That's Real American.
Since you're into music, I want to really thank Islamic State, friend of the show, and God rest his soul, JJ McGuire. Should maybe get a nod. Unfortunately, he just wasn't. Jimmy Hart overshadowed him.
Yeah, that's true. That JJ McGuire did most of the real work with Jimmy Hart, according to JJ. Yeah. And but Jimmy was kind of the mouthpiece, so to speak. Here's a series of picks, guys. I think these are actually the last 3 picks I put down, but we talk about, are they running out of names? And I've put a few things out here, like the wrestling album and the Nitro Girls, that are kind of non-conventional things. How about we induct a building or 2 or 3? How about we induct Madison Square Garden into the WWE Hall of Fame?
That's not a bad choice.
No, that's that. I mean, the Mecca.
And then I've got 2 other choices. If we're making a wing of buildings for this, Hall of Fame in our minds, my next 2 picks, one's very sentimental for me. I'll get to that last. Tipping the hat to WCW for the most part, the Atlanta Omni.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah.
I guess you could put the Dallas. You could put so many buildings. We could be here all night.
Yeah.
Right, but the one that I was picking, because it's really an arena that I think is overlooked. But this arena is where superstar Billy Graham beat Bruno Sammartino, I believe, back in 1977 for the WWWF title. It's still around, and it's changed names. It's gone from like the Baltimore Civic Center to the Baltimore Arena, and now it has one of those corporate advertising names. But I call it the Baltimore Arena. And this is where the Crockett Cup 87 happened. Dusty Rhodes and Nikita Koloff, Tully Blanchard and Lex Luger. The Baltimore Arena is where Owen Hart won the King of the Ring. I was there as a small child to see Owen Hart win the King of the Ring. And the Baltimore Arena, I believe, was one of AEW's first pay-per-views, was in the Baltimore Arena with Chris Jericho against Cody Rhodes. I think the Baltimore Arena, the Omni, that had so many big wrestling shows, and of course Madison Square Garden, to me.
Bain also says Philadelphia Spectrum. You can't forget about the Spectrum,
and for the West Coast fans, don't forget the Cow Palace, legendary arena.
And Maria Davis says that the Rupp Arena
in Kentucky. Yeah.
A
lot of good ones.
Hey, if I can interject, I want to name a few people or things that should be in the Hall of Fame. First and foremost, and Demolition, which I think is going to get the nod this year. I have a strange feeling it's going to happen.
They just signed a Legends contract.
Yep, which would be pretty incredible. I wouldn't expect a great Hall of Fame speech. Bill Eadie's awesome, but he's an awfully humble man. And here's one that they're running out of time with this one, but they should be putting the Rockers in. When you were involved in one of the biggest turns in pro wrestling history that everybody remembers, forget about all their talent as a tag team. When you're involved in that, you've got to put them into the Hall of Fame. And then I'll name a team or 2 teams that may not get your seal of approval, but I would go with the East-West connection, Jesse Ventura and Adrian Adonis. Adrian Adonis needs to be in the Hall of Fame.
He does, yeah, absolutely.
And the East-West connection, if you can't just put him in by himself. And then, to be fair, you have to put in Greg Gagne and Jim Brunzell.
High Flyers.
Yeah, High Flyers. I mean, again, as we get older, it becomes more and more of a problem because people don't even remember these teams or these people.
Right? It's really sad, though. I mean, even the casual baseball fan, like an 18-year-old kid, they're going to know who Lou Gehrig is, who Willie Mays is, Hank Aaron, those guys. But Christy Mathewson even. But the average wrestling fan, 18 years old, do they know who even Ox Baker is or
today's
Koloff
wrestling
or-
fan thinks wrestling started with Steve Austin. I hear it
Right.
all the time.
Let me say this though, because Bain is suggesting the Yukon Lumberjacks. Here's the thing, guys. I mean, is the Hall of Fame there to placate to the modern fan, or is it there to educate the modern fan? I mean, if you put, for instance, they have this thing called the legacy wing of the Hall of Fame, and once again, all this stuff is very in the mind because there's no brick and mortar building.
There's no building, right?
Right, but if you're going to put Bruiser Brody and ST Jones in this legacy wing, which basically means they don't want to pay the family for any rights or give the family a plaque or whatever it means. But I mean, I think to me personally, I think part of the concept of the Hall of Fame is for the wrestling fans that are young, the 20-year-old or the 18-year-old or 15-year-old, if they hear the name Bruiser Brody and they never saw a Bruiser Brody match, maybe they'll go on YouTube and look him up. Or maybe they'll say, well, who's this guy or who's that guy? And maybe they'll look him up. I mean, isn't that a benefit?
It definitely is a benefit. But again, you talk about YouTube, right? The popular shows are all about relevant wrestling and what did Coach from ESPN call it? Reaction podcasters. So no one, there's the old school wrestling channels like Monte and the Pharaoh or Dan and Benny in the Ring are starting to fade quickly. And you could tell by the numbers, right? Because people just aren't interested in the older wrestlers anymore. I mean, that is factual.
It's a shame. I
could tell by the numbers, right?
Well, I mean, what numbers are you citing?
Well, I could tell you when our channel first started and I'm just using YouTube, for example.
Okay.
Different, TikTok seems to be a bit different. But when I look at the analytics from when we had our first channel before it got shut down until now, slowly we've got interviews, even though they were from the first channel, that have like a Coco Beware on it that have 100 views. Now, I understand it may not be catching an algorithm, but you would think with 1 billion people out there on YouTube, and we'll just say 3 million of them are pro wrestling fans, you would catch more than 138 viewers for that video. And I'm not putting down the video or the channel or anything like that, but I think that the old school, if we were running a business, we would sit at a table and you would say to me, are we placating to today's fans? Or are we going to try to educate them? And I'm going to say to you, Mike, we're placaking to today's fans.
We're gonna whatever brings more to the bottom line, right?
That's right. It's not up to me to educate. And again, do I agree with you? Yes. But if we're running a business, no. Ivan Koloff is not bringing me attention. You know what I'm saying?
I understand the point. I mean, I'd say this: when the Iron Claw movie came out a year and change ago, a lot of people who were either marginal wrestling fans or current wrestling fans, but were not terribly familiar with the Von Erich family story and the tragedies, a lot of people went out to see the movie. And they might have, I mean, there was threads or tweets or X's or whatever where people were like finding out that as tragic as the Iron Claw movie was, there was another brother that committed suicide. And, people were making memes that they couldn't believe, as sad as the movie was, there was a whole other person that committed suicide after Mike.
It's fun. It's funny you bring that up, right? Because we just had a Brian Adias on, right? So they also came out of there not knowing the truth about that family, right? I thought it was a disservice to the Von Erichs. I thought it was a disservice to Fritz Von Erich, as you said. I thought it was a disservice to Chris Von Erich. That movie, in my opinion, should have had zero wrestling and told the Von Erich story.
But I think the story was wrestling. The Von Erich story and wrestling are interlaced.
Well, you don't need to show a 5-minute clip of some dude imitating Harley Race. I mean, who needs that? That was I don't even know what that was about. I'm just telling you from my viewpoint of it. There was so much meat on the Von Erich story that you could have got rid of their matches with the Freebirds they showed in there, the 5-minute clip of against Harley Race and Ric Flair. You didn't need to see a fake Ric Flair doing
It was
interview.
horrible, yeah.
But you just didn't need it. So if you just got rid of that, you can tell the story of Chris Von Erich. I don't care what the director or the producer says, right? They're saying the story was so tragic they just couldn't do it again. No, you ran out of time. You couldn't fit 2 pounds of shit, 10 pounds of shit into 200. I got to back out for a second, guys, because my dog is screaming at me.
All right. Well, now that Mike can't argue with me, let me defend the movie real quick here, Benny. I liked the movie The Iron Claw, and I think it's one of those things where artistically it could have gone a million ways. The real answer to what Monty was saying there is that the material is deserving of a series. Just like I just watched the Menendez brothers, a 10-part series, or Dahmer. I was never into the Jeffrey Dahmer story, but I got to think that a Von Erich 10-part series, 60 or 90 minutes an episode, 10 parts, you could have 2 or 3 seasons of that, and I would watch it. And
yeah, I would too.
I don't fault the filmmaker. I actually interviewed Kevin Anton twice, who played Harley Race in the Iron Claw. That's on One Pro Wrestling and Sports Fan YouTube channel. And in my opinion, it was a great movie. You can only how are you going to put 10 or 15 years into a 2-hour movie, Benny? Like I put the wonderful narrative of Fighter Play Basketball into my novel that's available in audiobook with Benny Scala doing the forward. Look at that wonderful cover. It's on my shirt. As far as the Hall of Fame, though, goes, there is a lot of interesting comments here. Jason Monning really disagrees with my venue stuff. He doesn't like the Baltimore Arena. Maria Davis has made some nice comments. I don't know if you want to check out these comments, Benny, but the people have been very active tonight.
Yeah, I just see my nephew, Joe Gadis, Uncle Benny, finally got you online. Welcome, Joe. Yeah, before, and hopefully Mike comes back, but I got a couple that we didn't get to.
Sure.
Well, we already covered them.
Mass Superstar.
See, I do think that he should also be in as the Mass Superstar, Bill Eadie. I think
What
he
if
should
the
have
Mass-
been a long time ago.
What if the Mass Superstar and Crusher Khrushchev induct Demolition? Can they pull that off?
Yeah, that'd be a trick. But I mean, to me, the Mount Rushmore of mass wrestlers is Superstar, Destroyer, Mascaris, and maybe the Spoiler. I know I'm forgetting somebody. You got Mr. Wrestling, and but I mean,
is the Spoiler because they do give credit to the Spoiler for Mark Callis, the Undertaker, took the top rope arm smash, old school like that. He learned that from the Spoiler, from watching the Spoiler.
Yes.
But do they? I'm trying to the Spoiler. What's his real name? Because I've heard it a million times.
Don Jardine.
Don Jardine.
Yes.
Is he in the Legacy wing? I mean, because that's a guy that's a slam dunk too.
No, he is not. Oh, and the other one I was thinking of, Mike, was the Destroyer, and I don't think he's in, and he should absolutely be in.
Yeah, the Destroyer, and he was big in Japan. Like he was. When I was a kid, they used to have a lot of stuff of the Destroyer going to Japan and being a big gaijin, as they say.
But he even, he went to the AWA. He becomes Dr. X. He beats Gagne for the world, the AWA title. And I think he unmasked, but he was just Dick Beyer. So nobody made the connection that the Destroyer was Dick Beyer. They knew that was his stipulation with Vern Gagne, but I think that's another no-brainer. But let me see. I got a couple that we talked about Sid already, right?
Yeah, we all said Sid. Here's a William Regal.
How about Regal? How about Regal?
I mean, that seems like another. I mean, yeah, he deserve it? Sure, but it does seem like another nepotism because he was the guy that gave Triple H his blessing to go to WWF in 1995 because it was supposed to be Regal and Triple H were the Blue Bloods. They were going to get a push in WCW, and Triple H was wavering to go to WWF, and Regal encouraged him, and Triple H never forgot that. So, the McMahons and Triple H, they all love William Regal, which is fine. To me, kind of like Monty was saying, maybe about Ox Baker. I just feel that William Regal, and he would probably admit this himself, he left a lot of stuff on the table because he had the demons, as the wrestlers say.
He did. Yes, that's true. Yeah, he could have been a lot more. A couple of people saying Bob Roop. I don't know about Bob Roop. I mean,
come
Bob
on,
Roop
man. Stop it. Yeah, just stop now. Enough.
What, with Bob Roop?
Yeah, enough. No.
Let me ask you guys. Go ahead.
No, I say Bob Roop had the personality of a number 2 pencil, and he was a good wrestler. But I mean, I could, if I had to think for like sit in a room and think for like 3 days of guys that would be in the WWE Hall of Fame, Bob Roop's name would never come to my mind.
Maria Davis is saying Baron Sakula, but Baron Sakula was in back in '96. Maria
Baron Sakula, yeah. And people don't, again, we talked about history. What people don't realize is that, of course it was years ago, but I think it was 1966, Baron Sakula was main eventing at Madison Square Garden against Bruno. And there was one match where he had Bruno in his hangman's hold, and Bruno kicked the referee, and they disqualified Sakula. Go figure that one out. But I mean, that was the level he was at. I mean, yeah, we remember him in the 80s losing to SD Jones. But I mean, the guy chose to homestead and stay in that area. But when, with that choice, though, same with Dominic DeNucci, at the end, he's putting everybody over. But the guy had a legendary career.
Here's a question, guys. Well, here's a statement and then a question. A couple of people are mentioning Matt Bourne as Doink. And even with Marty Jannetty, who I know is a good friend of the show, Monte and the Pharaoh, but Marty has had some issues, let's be honest. Some of his social media posts are really he's not doing himself any favors. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So my point is, does a person's outside the ring behavior, I mean, you could say that about the Von Erichs, all the Von Erichs got in, but if someone has issues with drugs or alcohol or trouble with the law, Marty Jannetty, Matt Bourne, who I saw him 3 or 4 days before he passed away. Is that to be held against these guys or women?
I think in today's WWE, yeah, we go back to China, right? I mean, he clearly stated WWE does not want someone Googling China and the first thing they come up with is a porn video, right? They don't want that. And again, if I keep thinking about business, I agree. Now, you brought the Von Erichs up. This goes to a point that people don't know. They don't know these problems that these guys had. Matt Bourne is Doink. I would love it. But again, who even remembers Doink? That's the other thing. Who remembers?
Yeah, I mean, what are we talking about? 3 years, maybe?
Here's the thing. I mean, you could say, well, the body of work. Matt Bourne wrestled at the first WrestleMania.
Yeah.
If you actually look at the matches, you can say that Matt Bourne and Ricky Steamboat, minute for minute, might have been the best match on the show.
But if you're gonna put Matt Bourne in, then you got to put in Playboy Buddy Rose. I mean, I don't know. Yeah. It's like
he's in the legacy. Buddy Rose is in the Legacy Hall of Fame.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
There's my follow-up point. If we are saying that outside the ring is a factor, and Triple H has said it himself in regards to China, do we strip Tammy Sitch of her Hall of Fame status now that she's in jail for at least, I believe it's 17 years for manslaughter, vehicular manslaughter of some kind here in the state of Florida, in a town that I've been through many times myself. So, I mean, that strikes close to home for me. But Tammy Sitch was put in the Hall of Fame, and they made a big deal about it. They put all these divas at the time behind her. They made all these women parade out there and put her over. She took credit for inspiring them, whether she did or not. They really made a production where they put Tammy Sitch back in. And then she fell back into the cycle of drugs and alcohol and whatever else. And she ended up, unfortunately, being the cause of, I wouldn't say she killed someone, but she was the cause of someone else's death. Let's put it that way.
She killed somebody. She did kill somebody. She killed him.
Right. So
she flat out killed him.
So if they stripped Hulk Hogan for 2 or 3 years, remember that when they put a ban or a 3 or 4 years of Hulk Hogan was stripped of his Hall of Fame status because of actions outside the ring where he's being videotaped without his knowledge and he's under the influence of drugs or marijuana and he's cheating on his wife with another guy's wife, blah, blah, blah. If they do that to Hogan, well, here with Tammy Sitch, like you said, somebody's dead.
So let me ask you this, Mike. Now, it's great that you brought this up because I know how, and I'll let Benny chime in too because I know how Benny feels, but he didn't have a chance to really say it on air. So you brought up Hulk Hogan, right?
Yes.
Used racial comments, right? I'm sure are not acceptable.
They
how
weren't
many
nice.
years ago, right?
Yeah.
But someone like Tommy Dreamer, who used his, obviously the plane ride from hell. That's Ric Flair being Ric Flair. It doesn't matter that he put his penis on a woman and made her, like pretty much molested her. And then he turns around on Busted Open Radio, and again, I don't care how anybody's religious beliefs are, but he called Jesus Christ a fake prophet twice on Busted Open Radio. But that shouldn't be challenged. That shouldn't be punished. Like, why is racism different than anti-Semitism or making fun of someone's beliefs?
Well, let me ask you this. In Tommy Dreamer's case, he's not in the WWE Hall of Fame. So who, in this exact scenario of Hogan getting punished, we can't do tit for tat because if Tommy Dreamer's not in the WWE Hall of Fame, how are you going to strip him of that status?
That's true, but should you punish him on Busted Open Radio?
I guess that would be up to Dave LaGreca is the host and producer of that show, right?
Right.
So I think that's a thing where Dave, who I've spoken with, and he was nice to me, but I think Dave, as the producer / host, he has to make a judgment call, which can be influenced by the listeners of the show. If enough listeners of the show said, hey, we were offended as a Christian or, whatever, Tommy Dreamer's statements didn't seem like he was just joking around.
So what you're saying is, I totally get what you're saying, but you're saying is unless the reaction is strong enough, the punishment isn't wielded. So since he said that on Dark Side of the Ring and millions of people saw it and then with some backlash, they punished him. But now that people pretty much, in today's day and age, we're talking about wrestling now to what we grew up with. It's a different fan base. They expect different things, right? We already know that, right? They need instant gratification. There's no slowdowns. So as long as it doesn't affect them and they're not angry about it, but it's clearly you understand it's wrong. It's as bad as calling someone racial slurs or anti-Semitic words. It doesn't need to be punished.
I'm not saying it does or it doesn't. I'm just
saying is that the thought process in today's society.
If you're asking me, does racism more loaded these days? It seems to be more loaded. I would agree with you. And when I say loaded, it seems that people are more uptight if something seems racist, especially against African-American folks, than other groups. I mean, I'll give you, for example, Mike, and I mean, now that we're going here, there's a lot of stuff where why aren't there more African-American coaches in the NFL? Why aren't there more African-American coaches? Why do the African-American coaches always get the shitty jobs, the jobs that nobody else wants, or they get interviewed, but you know what I mean? They just go through the motions. Well, how come there's not more Korean-American running backs in the NFL?
Well, let me ask you this. That's a business. That's different. That's a decision. As an owner, I'm not going to hire a CEO of the company based on their race or their religion. I'm going to hire the best man because I want to make money, right? That's different. Like, to me, that's apples and oranges, in my opinion, right? You got to be good enough. And if you're good, you're a terrible businessman if you make your decisions on someone's race or religion.
But the NFL, the fan base, or they talk about it like Stephen A. Smith and Shannon Sharp and so forth. They'll say, well, how come the black coaches get the shitty jobs? How come when they do get an opportunity, the African-American coaches, they often get the positions where a team is in transition and stuff. I don't have the answer for that, but I'm just saying nobody's on TV saying, well, how come there's, 60% of the U.S. is Caucasian, but there's only 10% of Caucasian players in the NFL or whatever the numbers are. Well, nobody argues that there should be more Caucasian players in the NFL, but people argue there should be more coaches or owners of African-American descent.
bring it back to wrestling. Back in the day when you were watching wrestling, there weren't any black wrestlers or Asian wrestlers. It just wasn't a sport
Very
where
unusual
they
anyway.
participated in it, right?
Well,
And then
no, because
slowly they came into it, right?
well, no, because when I started watching, Rocky Johnson and SD Jones were among my favorites, and Mr. Fuji and Mr. Saito were the tag champions. So I mean, that's Asian and black
But I
right
think
there.
if you go back to the 70s, you typically had like one black maybe in each promotion and no more than that.
But that's the amount that was coming. It wasn't like they were all trying to break down the door, right? It was like it was a white person sport for a very long time. And then every so often there would be, whatever. But it's changed now. Now it's totally changed, in my opinion.
Well, I was there when Ron Simmons beat Vader, and that was very exciting in Baltimore, August 2nd, 1992. I mean, the Baltimore Arena that I nominated for the Hall of Fame earlier. I was there when Ron Simmons beat Vader, and the place went nuts. White people, black people, everybody was going crazy with celebration. I don't know. I mean, I for all the negative stuff about pro wrestling, the abuse of drugs, alcohol, some of these guys have had crazy lives. We know that. But I will say that, in my opinion, pro wrestling has actually been ahead of the curve in a lot of ways with race relations and fans being encouraged to cheer Kerry Von Erich and Iceman King Parsons in Texas as a tag team back in 1983, or the stuff that Sputnik and Moreau did in Tennessee, or the Junkyard Dog was universally loved. And you could say, well, his character with the dog chain or whatever, but he was universally loved. I mean, Big Cat Ernie Ladd was a guy that was intimidating because he was legit. And I do think that wrestling, as far as race relations goes, granted, you've had stuff like some pretty bad stuff as well. I mean, even as recently as Crime Time was a bit goofy, although that was kind of, tongue in cheek, as they say. But I think wrestling's, it hasn't been perfect with race relations, but it's at least they've done stuff, if that makes any sense.
Wrestling's a microcosm of the real world, right? It evolved, it evolves, and now it's evolved more. And again, the world is evolving. But in my concern is that the moral fiber of this country and the moral fiber of the fan, especially the wrestling fan, has gone away. There is no moral fiber.
The bar has definitely been lowered for sure, because something Tommy Dreamer's comment should have sparked, in my opinion, a mass outrage to like get this guy off the air, or we're going to cancel our subscription, because it's pretty egregious. And why is it? If he had made a racial comment, he's off the air in 5 seconds. If he made a homophobic comment, same thing. But it's okay to take a pot shot at somebody's faith, and he gets a free pass, and it's just not right.
That's such a really great point, Benny. It's like there didn't even need to be an outcry. If he just would have said it, it would have been over.
It's wrong because it's wrong. Yeah, you're right. It's not because a million people say something, or 10. If it's wrong, it's wrong.
But can I jump in here and say, now that we're going down this path, is there enough people? And this is not a shot against Busted Open, but are there enough people that actually listen to the show to care? I mean, is there enough people out? Like, for instance, the people that listen to Busted Open Radio, right? They're fans. That's the choir. But people like I know of the show. I'll listen occasionally, but I guess I'm not emotionally invested. Whatever the hell Tommy Dreamer says, it's not going to wake me up or put me to sleep at night.
You know what, Mike? You bring a good point, because and that's what I'm trying to say. This is what's wrong with society. There's a wrestling fan, and they don't care that there was a religious shot. They just want to hear if the Roman Reigns is going to wrestle in this year's WrestleMania in the main event. And it's like, people, wake the fuck up! Enough already, right? It's like, stop.
Well, it's not to me. I mean, my point is, I've met Tommy Dreamer in real life. I've gone to a Denny's with him. He's been nice enough to me. Do I think he's out there radically insulting religion every day of the week? Probably not. If he was trying to get some buzz or trying to be funny and it fell flat.
So what did you feel about his comments about Ric Flair being Ric Flair during Dark Side of the Ring? Put aside the religious comments.
I would say that, in my opinion, and based on what I heard Jim Ross say about that same episode, they used some very creative editing to make a story for that show, which all television programs do. But when you take talking head interviews and you interlace them with each other and with reenactments, and the woman, the lady on the plane actually who made those allegations against Ric Flair and so forth, she actually has a criminal record herself, I believe, of fraud or something like that. So is her word to be totally trusted? I would say probably not. So my opinion is that having, been in the editing room of my own projects and so forth, I know for a fact that the nuances of editing can greatly affect one way or the other how someone is displayed. And if you take a quote from Jim Ross or Tommy Dreamer, where they're kind of making light of Ric Flair, or Nature Boy is Nature Boy, Rick is Rick, blah, 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 the boys will be boys, any of those type of comments. And if you interlace that with this stewardess crying and saying that she was sexually assaulted, of course the wrestlers are going to look like crap. But if you took the same interview clip with the stewardess and she's crying and she's saying I was sexually assaulted, and then you say, okay, Tommy, okay, Jim Ross, we're going to show the clip of this woman crying and saying that she was assaulted by Flair, and now you have to respond, and we're going to put your exact response. They didn't do that, is my point. They used creative editing to make wrestlers
here's my thing. I remember that whole thing, and I was first flabbergasted that Dave LaGreca, his partner and his friend, kicked him off the air the following day, and pretty much, did not stand by him. Number two, Tommy Dreamer went to social media apologizing. So if someone used editing on you, Mike, wouldn't you say, hey, look, this was taken out of context, this is not what was said, and it's unfortunate, and stand by it? Or would you just apologize?
Well, Jim Ross did the first thing you said. Jim Ross on his podcast with Conrad Thompson basically was complaining about the creative editing, and he was swearing off the guys at Dark Side of the Ring and saying he would never work with them again, until he did, of course. As far as Tommy Dreamer goes, I think
it's so funny. Yeah. Money, don't matter.
Right. In our culture, cancel culture, hashtag culture, gotcha culture, basically I think Tommy Dreamer did this strategy of better to bite the bullet and apologize rather than try to explain myself and dig the hole deeper. And I think sometimes that's what everybody that's being asked to apologize for something that they did, you have that choice. Do you defend yourself? Because then you seem like you're not owning it, as the kids say. If you defend yourself, then you're not owning it. You haven't accepted responsibility, blah, blah, blah. But if you just say, I screwed up, my bad, I apologize if I hurt your feelings, or because I hurt your feelings, I apologize, people often enjoy that more. Like, that's more forgive and forgettable if you just own it, apologize, and move on, than if you try to deny it or make excuses. And I think it could have just been a strategy that Tommy took that path.
Okay, so then when Hogan makes his apology, how come 10 years later, 15 years later, they're still booing a guy out of the building?
Well, because, I'm not playing politics, but because Hogan worked with Trump and was speaking for Trump. And I think that if you went to some arenas in the country, like if you went to a more red state, let's say even Florida or Texas, Hogan may not have been booed. But if you're in Los Angeles, Hogan was booed. And I think the other thing with Hogan is the whole thing that was very weird, the whole deal with Hulk Hogan and the racism stuff, because people don't talk about the fact that he was cheating on his wife, or that he was sleeping with his buddy's wife, who the woman that he's having sex with in that tape, the sex tape, Hogan, that's Bubba the Love Sponge's wife. So they're playing right, they're playing Take My Wife, Please. So people don't bring up that part of the story, that this is some freaky, P. Diddy stuff, as people would say, but they harp on the racism stuff. And to me, the reason why that they harp on the racism stuff is because it's like finding out that Santa Claus is a racist. Like Hulk Hogan, not Terry Bollea, but the Hulk Hogan icon, body slamming Andre the Giant, the Mega Powers with Randy Savage, all that Hulk Hogan iconic free was like Santa Claus. And so African-American people felt like, hey, this is Hulk Hogan's for us too. And then when the real Hulk Hogan had these comments, even if they're taken out of context, even if they were never supposed to be released to the public, even if he was high as a kite and cheating on his wife with his buddy's wife, all that stuff doesn't matter, because they hear Santa Claus saying the N-word. They hear Santa Claus saying disparaging things about his, lily white Barbie doll daughter. dating a black guy, and he should, at least he should have money, and all the horrible things that Hogan said. It was very insulting and very personal to the black fans because they felt like they were betrayed. And I don't have the solution to that other than.
But which one was it? Was it politics or racism?
It could be both. It could be Chinese restaurant, if that's politically correct. You get your chow mein in column A and you get your egg foo young in column B. It's this and that.
And Benny, I'm sorry I dragged your show into this. We're talking about the Hall of Fame, so please take it back, please.
Yeah. So, what do you think of this? I don't think you commented on this guy, Mike.
Forget it. Move on.
No,
not even a second thought.
We talked about Lauper already. Victoria
deserves it more than Michelle McCool.
Yeah,
Thumbs
I
up.
agree.
Thumbs up. Yeah, she's great.
Will she make it? No, I don't think.
Maybe someday.
With this guy, no brainer, right?
I mean, he's buddy. Look, Mike Monte made some great points that it's a business. Well, Dave Bautista has come into his own as an actor. A lot of times he's in very, very big movies in an ensemble. Was it Drax in the Guardians of the Galaxy? He was in an M. Night Shyamalan movie. Sometimes he is the leading man, but a lot of times, like, he's the big guy. I just saw the Pamela Anderson movie, and he plays Pamela Anderson's sort of love interest in that. So Dave Bautista has a whole new following of Hollywood people. And so if you were going to put him in, you may not need him the same year as you have The Rock, but I mean, I think Dave Bautista goes in. Sure.
You might see some reverse politics on this one because clearly Dave is on the left, which is fine. But I think his outspoken comments on the left kind of hurt him, considering, if anyone's not aware, the WWE is certainly a hard right company, right? Or at least some of the members that were part of it anyway. But I think I agree with you, Mike. You could only have so many headliners, right? You got to save them all, right? So you can't just start pounding it. And Triple H is Triple H the headliner this year, or are they going with somebody else?
I mean, Triple H was the first one announced. A lot of times the first one announced turns out to be the headliner. I would be surprised if they got someone, unless it's The Rock or Batista, who would be bigger than Triple H. But here's another concept that just occurred to me as you were saying that, Mike Monte. Could they add SummerSlam or another weekend, or maybe in Riyadh, maybe in Saudi Arabia? Could they put another Hall of Fame induction ceremony in the calendar year? Who's stopping them? Why stopping them? Why wouldn't
do
they
whatever
do
they want? Yeah, would they?
They could. I mean, if you want to say we got Batista, John Cena's not in yet, right?
No.
So
John Cena's not in yet. No.
So you got Batista, you got The Rock, you got Triple H, you got Cena, you got all the guys, Sid, The Fiend, Bray Wyatt, all the people that I listed, all the people you guys listed, all the people the fans listed. But if you have all these people, and if you start doing outside the box things like I suggested, the Baltimore Arena or the wrestling album, you could spread these out. You could have some in Saudi Arabia. You could have some at SummerSlam.
Well, let's not forget the Royal Rumbles in Saudi Arabia next year, right?
I think so. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so soon, soon they're going to go so international. You won't have any of these major, these major events in the States. I was just thinking about that too. So, Mike, you're right. They could have Hall of Fames at every friggin' event.
Well, and I mean, that's a very good point because, like, I think there's probably at least, we could come up with 30 names that legitimately belong in. Now, they're not going to induct 30 people in 1 year or at one shot. So what do they do? I mean, if you do 5 in a shot, do you wait? You make somebody wait 6 years? You probably have to do something like that. Maybe you do it 2 or 3 times a year.
Here's the thing, guys, that I think a lot of the stuff now that WWE, what's the group called? Is it TKO with UFC
TKO.
and WWE?
Yeah.
So now that, let's just say, the pressure is off, WWE has these huge contracts with Netflix. They're part of a bigger system now, blah, blah, blah. They're not really, they're living high on the hog, right? And so creatively, they are freed up. And I think Stephanie McMahon made the point very well that what we do best is provide content for our fans. This is what Stephanie said when they started doing the merger stuff. So now that they don't necessarily have to get all the anxiety about making every single dollar every single month, or if this show bombs, we're going to lose to Nitro or whatever. Now that they're kind of freed up because they're so high and mighty and more power to them, they can. And now that Vince is pretty much out of the picture, at least as far as we know, it's like dad has gone to work and Big Brother's in charge of the house, right? So when Big Brother's in charge, that's when you break out the keg party. That's when you start doing stuff like having Cody Rhodes win the title at WrestleMania. And that's when you start doing stuff like having 3 or 4 Hall of Fames a year instead of just one.
It wouldn't be out of question as far as I'm concerned.
No, me neither. That's a really good point.
Yeah. We talked about Bray. All right, we talked about Koloff. How about these guys?
Well, Tony, isn't Tony in? Is Tony in or not?
Tony is not in.
That's bizarre that Tony Gurria is not in. He's not in the legacy. He's not in anything.
Mike, am I wrong? I don't think Gurria is in.
I think you're correct, sir. Let me look real quick.
Because he was a guy that was behind the scenes.
I know Marcel's not in. No, I don't think Tony Gurria is in.
I think that's insane. And I think, I mean, those were the guys that were like the big tag team right before I started watching. So Benny, you would know them, and I don't know about Mike, but Martel and Gurria were like the superstar tag team.
Gurria was I believe a 5-time champion with 4 different partners. You had Haystacks Calhoun, you had Zbyszko, you had Dean Ho, and you had Martel.
Gurria is not in the WWE Hall of Fame, but he is in the Luthea's Hall of Fame.
Yeah. The one in Iowa, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer.
Is it Luthez or Luthiez?
You're right. It's Luthez.
Luthez.
You're right. Yeah,
okay.
Luthez.
Yeah.
Are you fucking with? In any event, Rick Martel, I think, has distanced himself from pro wrestling, which is a shame. But yeah, there's always like a couple of guys that are out there. Like even when Sid was alive, you know, people were wondering why isn't Sid in the Hall of Fame? And I always go back to this. This always angers me that Leon White Vader was petitioning to go into the WWE Hall of Fame on he was served notice that he was dying, and he basically tweeted or X'd or Instagrammed, "I want to go in the Hall of Fame before I die," and they didn't put him in the Hall of Fame. They waited till after he was dead. So yeah. I mean, stuff like that pisses me off. I don't know if you guys get upset about it.
No, yeah, it's like, you know, that's what I'm saying. You got a lot of guys out there getting sicker and older, and you know, they really. Like, I will tell you, I'm concerned about Marty Jannetty. I would love to see Marty get that nod. I would really like to see it. And, you know, going back to Coco Beware, what I wanted to say about him was, you got to remember something back then. Coco was a big deal in the WWE. Forget about, Mike, you mentioned all his great jobs in the, you know, in the regional areas, but in the WWE, he was big time, man. And he was the main singer for Pile Driver. He was highly popular for a very, very long time. Definitely deserved the nod in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, and that's why it bothered me when people were giving Coco a hard time, because to me, I didn't quite get it. Because I mean, you know, it just seems like the fans, like, you could pick on Hillbilly Jim if you wanted to. You know what I mean? Like who's it? Like that's what I'm saying. I typically don't have any problem with who gets in. It's just that
it's always who's not in,
who's left out, and
right.
I think Mike Monte with Jim Brunzell and Greg Gagne, and then you have things like this. Well, if you're going to say the high flyers go in, does that leave B. Brian Blair out? Because otherwise, you could be Brian Blair with Jim Brunzell as
the Killer Bees.
And I will tell you, from speaking to Brian, you know, he really wants to be in the WWE Hall of Fame. It's a big deal for him.
Yeah, of course he would. Why wouldn't he?
Yeah, and I mean, to me, it's like, what's interesting about the WWE Hall of Fame is we do get excited about it. We get worked up about it. We have these debates. There is no brick and mortar building. And what's interesting is it's called the WWE Hall of Fame, yet there's many people, Jushin Liger, the Great Muta, Abdullah the Butcher, that either had like 1 or 2 matches in the WWE or none altogether. And they get in. Yeah, Bullet Bob Armstrong, great.
Well, you could say the same thing about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, right? It's, you know, it's not really rock and roll; it's Music Hall of Fame.
Yeah, and I think that's, to me, like I said, it's just an interesting thing where Bret Hart years ago criticized the Freebirds getting into the WWE Hall of Fame, and he basically pissed and moaned about it. But it's like, well, the Freebirds, in some ways, Brett, they did stuff that you didn't do. They went to different
Mhm.
territories like Florida and Mid South and Texas, and sold out these different places. And Brett, you were basically part of Calgary, Japan, and WWF and WCW. You basically were part of the machine. The Freebirds were like the Wild Wild West. They were like cowboys going out there and making shit
Yeah.
happen.
Well,
So
you hit it on the head. It's easy when you're part of the machine. The machine is what makes you. You know what I'm saying? I had this argument with Mitch Seinfeld about the Freebirds because he felt the Freebirds really didn't draw anything except for WCCW, and I totally disagreed. In fact, they made WCCW. They made the Mid South area. They were, the Freebirds were a very important part of pro wrestling history, and I'd honestly be I would say they're more important to wrestling than Bret Hart ever will be.
there's a case to be made, and if on YouTube there's a somewhere on YouTube somebody compiled the Freebirds angle with Mike Graham after. I mean, this is some hardcore stuff. I mean, people, if you want to talk about politically correct, Mike Graham's father, who was the promoter in Florida, commits suicide,
Right.
and basically the Freebirds use that to turn heel on his son, who's like mourning the death of his father, the promoter, and the Freebirds use the death of his father to start an angle. And it's
Right.
like it's a great fucking angle. I mean, it's just like if you hey, if the guy's dead already, why don't you make a buck about it? You know what I mean? Like Eddie would probably approve because in some bizarre way in the wrestling world, they're honoring his legacy by still using his name and likeness in this angle. And I mean, Fritz von Erich had a heart attack supposedly in a Texas cage match with the Freebirds were there. And I mean, it is just a thing where perspectives, from Bret Hart's perspective, he's at WrestleMania 2 with Andre the Giant. He's at WrestleMania 13 with Steve Austin. And from Bret Hart's perspective, the Freebirds were just these regional guys who came in and they got kicked out of the WWF because Andre the Giant didn't like them because they were drunk. And from Bret's perspective, sure, they weren't as good as him. But from us as knowledgeable fans, we know better than the wrestler in that case.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I can't disagree with that at all. Very good comments.
I would say, what about this? Is there the WWE Hall of Fame presentation, Mike, has done different presentation like platforms. They like I was just watching before we went on tonight. There's the 1994 Hall of Fame took place at the King of the Ring, 1994 in Baltimore. And it's basically just the boys. Like it's Arnold Scotland and Big Cat Lad and Vince and Shane and Stephanie are there and they're teenagers. This stuff is great to watch.
Mm.
And it's like, to me, no offense to the fans, but I think when the WWE started using the Hall of Fame as a cash cow, when they started like putting the Hall of Fame in front of a live audience where people can chant and say what or whatever the hell they're going to do, they took away a big part of it where it just seems like a banquet of the workers. Like to me, I think it's much more intimate and it just feels better when the fans are not there live, like when it's just the wrestlers and their families and the promoters. I think that's a better way of doing the Hall of Fame. And if you tape it, fine. But I just don't like that live audience being there because a lot of times they ruin it.
That's a good point too, but I would say the opposite of it was last year with Paul Heyman. That crowd was on fire, and it was one of the best Hall of Fame speeches I've ever heard in my life. So I guess it goes both ways. But you bring up some really good points. Here's the thing, guys. The wrestling we grew up in and watching and love and the way we think about it is so far gone. It's like either get on a board because they're not going to play to us. It's over. Like we're not their target audience. They could care less what we think. It doesn't matter. The internet wrestling community, um, IWC, it has some power, but very little at this point. So, it's what it is.
There was a person in the comments who brought up as someone that I forgot to write down, but I'm glad the commenter did. I think it was just Islamic State mentioned Kevin Sullivan, who unfortunately was a friend of the show, friend of the channel, and he passed away in the last 12 months. And I'm here in Florida, and to me, I wish I had the time machine to go back and see Kevin Sullivan and the Purple Haze, Mark Lewin, who should also be in the Hall of
I've
Fame.
said that many times. Go back to 1979.
That was the argument I had with Mitch too, was he felt that Sullivan was bigger than the Freebirds. And I would say this, Sullivan should go in as a booker, in my opinion. I also think that Gary Michael Capetta should go in as an announcer. There's some announcers that should go in also. It's like there is, there is a plethora of people that could go in, and it is up to each person. But the shame of it is, like I said, as the years go by, the guys that we grew up on and love, it's over. You're never going to see them make it in. And I do fail to understand why they don't actually make a legitimate building. They have more than enough money. They could pay someone to manage that for them. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if their fear is no one's going to go.
Too, I would think.
I don't know if they would or they wouldn't.
I don't think they'd lose anything.
Well, they opened up the restaurant in Manhattan. That closed after a year, right?
Yeah.
So, again, you got to always remember this, right? Of all the people on this planet, there's really just about a 3 million person fan base for wrestling. It's not much more than that. 3 million is a lot, but in the football world or the baseball world or the hockey world, no, it's not. So it's like, when you start they must do the analytics, and when they start venturing and thinking about opening up a building, they're probably like, you know what? There's not going to be enough people to go see this. It's not like the Baseball Hall of Fame, I'm assuming.
Right.
I think it's what the sad thing is, I know that what do they have? The WWE Experience in Saudi Arabia, which I've seen them advertise it. I haven't seen any footage from there. But my fear would be that if and when there is a WWE Hall of Fame official building or official part of a building, quite honestly, my fear is that it would be a Saudi Arabian thing. And that's, and guys, 5 or 6 years ago, when I was on the Monte and the Pharaoh show and I was rallying against the WWE doing the greatest Royal Rumble and the crown jewel, and people were saying, "Oh, Mike, you're talking about me. You're crazy. These are just novelty shows, and they'll never have a title change in Saudi Arabia, and they'll never do a real pay-per-view in Saudi Arabia." Well, people, I was right. You were wrong. They're doing the Royal Rumble there. They had Braun Strowman and Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar wrestle for the title, and title changes have happened there.
But you know what? You were right, but you were also wrong, because you said it was wrong to go over there. It was a mistake. It was a disgrace. And in the reality of it, no one cares. They love it, right? Doesn't matter now. Well, all the women wrestlers go with no problem at all. You got Sami Zayn going there now. It's like, the sword, the sword you fell on is the sword everybody else decided not to fall on, I'm assuming, right?
Well, here's the thing, and you said this earlier in a different context, Mike, with the Dave LaGreca, Tommy Dreamer stuff, does the amount of outrage make something right or wrong? Is that what decides it? Or is it just right or wrong because it's right or wrong? And I think the thing, like, how wrestlers now will talk about the plane ride from hell because it was 20 years ago, or like there's these different things that people talk about now. I'm waiting for 10 or 15 years in the future when these wrestlers start talking about the crown jewel shows and the greatest Royal Rumble shows. And I believe there was a show in Saudi Arabia when they were trying to leave the country and they were all stuck on the plane for 5 or 6 hours. So, I mean, I think some of the stories where the dirt is underneath the fingernails, and maybe even how some of these women were treated, like Lita or Trish Stratus or Becky Lynch.
But what's funny, Mike? I'm sorry to interrupt, but I was just thinking that 10 years from now, you won't see these YouTube shoot interviews anymore because there will be nothing to talk about. Like, what'd you guys do? Oh, well, we hung out and we went to the gym and then we ate a healthy meal and then we went home. I mean, that's the story you're going to get. And I will tell you this, Mike. I have a friend that used to work for the WWE. He left a couple of years ago. He said in Saudi, it was pretty basic. You went there, all the wrestlers, all the people got locked up in a hotel. You weren't allowed to leave, and you stayed there. And then you went to the event, and then you went back, and you stayed in that hotel. And again, we talked about a sword to fall on. it's like the women, everybody was outraged about the women. The women have no problem going there anymore. So it's like, if they can't fall on the sword, I'm not falling on the sword. You know what I'm saying? I guess is the point, you know?
Yeah, I mean, and I think that comes down to the individual fan and their interpretation. For me, I don't know if it was just the Saudi thing, but I think that's in the mix of where do I personally stand with the WWE now? Look, when I was 13 or 15, if you told me that you'd have this streaming service called Netflix and I could sit there and watch a 2.5 hour show every Monday night, I'd be going happy. I'd be so happy, right? But now the amount of wrestling it feels like a burden, quite honestly. Like I'm supposed to watch 2.5 hours on Monday and then come back on Friday and stay home on a Friday night and watch 2 hours of SmackDown. And I'm supposed to watch an event every weekend. And that's just one promotion. Because then if you want to see some of your favorite wrestlers that used to be in WWE, well, now you got Chris Jericho and Mercedes Moné and Dean Ambrose. They're all in AEW now, and you got to watch that too. Well, when I was 13 years old, I would be excited about it. Now that I'm a little bit older, I'm not too excited about it. So I just think it's where people are at with their perspective.
That's a great point, man. And I got to tell you, it is too much wrestling, and it's at a point, it's getting crazy. I will tell you, it's funny. I got so into it again for a while when Roman was the champion. The storylines were so good. His matches, even though, like, talk about the difference between him and Cody. You knew Roman wasn't going to lose, but when he wrestled his matches, also you're like, oh my God, he's going to lose. Like, he's going to lose. I cannot believe they're going to let Daniel Bryan beat him. This is crazy. Or I can't believe they're going to let Drew McIntyre beat him. These matches with Cody Rhodes, it's like, why bother? It's like, you can't even think that he's going to lose the belt. And this is we've been around long enough. We've seen wrestling get really good, then we see it get really bad, then it gets really good and really bad. I think we're coming around a point where it's going to go back to just being whatever. Or maybe not. I don't know. But in my opinion, I see it going the wrong way now.
I see, like, on the shows, it seems like, especially WWE, just a lot of talking. Like, as much as they made a big deal about the first Netflix Raw, it was what, 2.5 hours, 2 hours and 45 minutes and 4 matches. And had I bought a ticket to see that, I think I'd be pretty pissed because, like I said, guys, I was at the Crockett Cup and I saw like 35 matches in 2 nights. So, I mean, if you're going to have a wrestling show for 2.5 hours and they're making a big deal that the executive from Netflix is there, and why should I give a shit? And here comes The Rock to put himself over for another 15 minutes when he's supposed to be putting over the younger people. I just, my emotional connection to the WWE product right now, the biggest connection comes when I go to the NXT shows and I see that there are families bringing their small children, probably because the small children are bringing the parents to come to this, 400 seat venue. And that's when I feel like, okay, wrestling one way or another is going to survive. It'll survive the good. It'll survive the great. It'll survive the horrible.
Can I ask you a question? Who booked the Crockett Cup?
It had to be. I would assume Dusty was the booker.
I gotta tell you, when they came out with the Crockett Cup, and I was a WWE guy, I was so like jealous. Like, why doesn't the WWE do this? This is the most incredible thing ever. You are very lucky to have seen that.
Yeah, I've got the program in this room somewhere. Yeah, I had a great time, and here's a little tip of my hat to my friend at the time. My buddy worked his parents because they were like, yeah, we'll take you to Baltimore, but we're not going to go both nights. Pick your night, Friday or Saturday. And my friend accidentally got tickets for both nights. So the solution was they sent big brother Rick to take me and my friend Randy to the first night on Friday night. We go to this show. It ends at like 11:30 at night or midnight, whatever it was. And then we couldn't find the car. My friend's brother, he drove a Challenger, like a 1978 green Challenger, and the C had fallen off the name of the car. So we called it the Hallinger. So we got 2 like preteens walking around with like a 16-year-old kid trying to find the green Hallinger in downtown Baltimore on a Friday night in 1987. And to Rick Meck's credit, he picked up a fucking stick. He found like some random stick, and like this was our defense in case some Baltimore gangbangers came and tried to pull colors on us. We had a stick, But luckily, I'm alive, so I guess we got home in one piece. And we came back the next night with Randy's father, and we watched the second night of the Crockett Cup, and I still have photographs that I took as a young child from that event.
2 questions. How many 1-minute matches were there in the Crockett Cup? And then what was the finals of that Crockett Cup?
The finals was Dusty. It was Dusty and Nikita as the number 2 seed defeated the number 8 seed, I want to say, of Tully Blanchard and Lex Luger. I think they were number 7 or number 8 seed. The seeding thing was weird because they kind of tipped the hat. When they said that Dusty and Nikita were the number 2 seed, they should have put them lower in the seeding, so it'd be more of an upset when they won the damn thing. But that's Dusty booking. Not only did he have to win, but he had to put himself on the top.
Who was the number 1 seed at that?
Raging Bull, Manny Fernandez, and Ravishing Rick Rude, because they were the NWA tag team
That's
champions.
right.
And
now,
go
ahead. I was going to ask you how many squash matches were like 1-minute matches were going on? Because you saw a lot of matches. Really? So they had like extended matches, huh? Wow.
The first match that happened was like George South and Steve Kern went to a 20-minute draw with somebody. Like it was like Bobby Jaggers and like it was some random like basically because the Fabulous Ones had to break up because Stan Lane went to the Midnight Express. So that left like Steve Kern to team up with maybe Mike Graham as a Florida team, like a Florida Frankenstein team. And they fought maybe Bobby Jaggers, and the other Dutch Mantel no-showed. So they put Bobby Jaggers in there.
That's a surprise. Dutch Mantel no-show.
Right. So they had Bobby Jaggers with like Mike Jackson or George South or something. So the first match of the show was a 20-minute draw. So the Japanese guys, Baba and his partner, got like another bye. So here's how hardcore we were, Mike, for that. I should do a whole show with you about the Crockett Cup. But basically, it was a 24-team tournament, right? And then the first night, Robert Gibson comes out to the ring with Gary Michael Capetta, and Robert Gibson says that Ricky Morton has a detached retina, so the Rock and Roll Express cannot compete. Actually, Gary Michael Capetta said all this stuff. Robert just nodded his fucking head. And then the Rock and Roll Express withdrew because of Ricky Martin's detached retina. Well, on TBS for several weeks, they were telling us that not only were there 24 tag teams in the Crockett Cup, there were 2 standby teams that were being brought in to Baltimore just to be put on standby, just in case something happened. And so after the first night of walking around with a stick looking for the Hallinger, me and my buddies stayed up all night debating who is going to be the substitute team to take the place of the Rock and Roll Express, because 23 tag teams were not good enough for us. So we go back to Baltimore the next night, and we're sitting there trying to figure out who's the 24th team. And we're thinking maybe the Gladiators, because they had just lost to the Mulkeys on TBS. Well, guess what? There was no substitute for the Rock and Roll Express. They lied to us. They lied to us about the 25th and 26th team being there. And we were actually upset about it because we're not getting our money's worth here. Like these tickets cost $15. We're seeing Ole Anderson and Big Bubba Rogers in a cage. We're seeing Ric Flair and Barry Windham with the 5-star match, but we want our 25th tag team in this goddamn Crockett Cup.
That is some great stuff, man. Hey, listen, before I go, I got 2 more Hall of Fame inductees I want you guys to weigh in. First one, Mario Mancini, and the second one, Paul Roma. What do you think?
I have go ahead, Benny. Do you want to take that one first? Because I got some thoughts.
I am very rarely at a loss for words, but I am speechless at this moment.
I actually have some people that have done business with those guys because they have a gym in Connecticut, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for Paul Roma's wrestling career. I think he's one of those guys that maybe if he had played the game a little bit better, basically put up with more shit and played the game.
If he put Alex Wright over, he might have.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, because I think as an athlete or as a wrestler, I think Paul Roma was magnificent. And I think to his credit, like a Bret Hart, like Paul Roma was started off as a job guy, but then he did the tag team with Hercules, and he did the tag team before that with Jim Powers, and
made it to the Horsemen.
Yeah, I think Roma has a very respectable career, and he does feel like a guy who he seems a little edgy. Like, I've never met him, but he seems kind of edgy, like he's got a chip on his shoulder, and I don't hold that against him, but I just think that I would have liked to have seen him do more. And but Mario Mancini, I mean, he seems like my very brief interaction with Mario wasn't particularly pleasant, but it was also very brief. So I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm more of a Roma guy than a Mario guy.
You got to elaborate more on that. What does not particularly pleasant mean? What happened?
I was at I want to say 2015 New England Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. It was at a very big venue. The night that I went, it was like a VIP dinner, and I paid the $100 to hang out with the VIPs, and I was very excited because Eric Bischoff was advertised. Well, of course, he missed his goddamn flight, so the one guy that I wanted to see doesn't show up. And then there was
you don't have any luck with that, do you?
No, I don't.
You ain't kidding, man.
Then there was the Jim Cornette actually was there, and you know that Sam Robertson guy, that I'm Not Sam, or with the afro.
Yeah.
Guy? So this was 2015. He still had the afro. So Sam led a Q&A with Cornette, and that was really fun because like the whole room was packed. Cornette was selling his Midnight Express book. I got to meet Cornette and talk to him. Sam was fine, but there was this young female kind of local rapper, like, white rapper chick who kind of had like the Eminem thing going. And I was talking to her about wrestling and rap and all this stuff. And basically Mario Mancini comes in and he basically intrudes, and he just looks at me and says, "Are you with her? Are you with her?" And I said, "No, I just met her." He says, "Okay." And he basically shoves me aside so he can talk to Eminem chick and basically he's trying to promote his goddamn wrestling school to female Eminem. And I'm just like, okay, well, I guess I'm not Mario Mancini. I didn't job to Paul Orndorff for 6 months straight in 1986. So I guess I'm not as cool as that. But that was my unpleasant. Like I said, it's not like he didn't spit in my drink or he didn't put a roofie in my soda. It just was cock blocking, I guess.
Hey, by the way, Joe Gaducci says Sam Roberts, he was on Opie and Anthony. Is that where he got his start?
I guess so. I'll take your word for it, Joe.
That's Gadis, Mike. That's my nephew, Joe.
Oh, okay. Hey, Joe, how are you? He said that you brought him to the Nassau Coliseum, his first.
Yeah, we saw Hulk Hogan against Bad News Brown. Bad News Brown ghetto blasted Hogan, leaves him laying, and then he like disappears for about 15 minutes. And when he comes back, by then Hogan came too, and he won the match. But
I think I read that. I think we spoke about that. I read that Hogan had like a 103 temperature that night, but he didn't want to cancel because it was a big payday. It was a sellout or something. Oh, so Sam Roberts got to start there. Well, anyway, guys, I got to cut out. It's been a great show. Thank you so much.
Well, we're almost 2 hours into this. So, yeah. So I was going to say, do not forget True Crime on Monday night with Bad News in the Playa. Tuesday night, Dan and Benny in the Ring. And there's Mike's book, Fight or Play Basketball, with me doing the even on Audible, doing the forward. And
you did a great job.
But thank you. And to go on Audible and listen to yourself, it's like, holy shit. Very, very go ahead.
The book can even be listened to for free. So you can tell our buddy there, Jimmy Pharaoh, he doesn't have to spend a dime to listen to my audiobook, Mike. He can get the Hoopla app with any library card. I'm sure he's got some library card from 1989 he can dust off.
He might have some overdue fines, though.
He might have like Jerry Seinfeld.
He's got book fines. Jimmy has
$3,000 from that Yogi Berra book he checked out in 1982. Like,
no, he took out the Thurman Munson should have been an.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. I'm sorry.
But
the name of the book is "How Is Thurman Munson Not in the Hall of Fame?" Go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry.
That's all right. You listen to my audiobook for free on Hoopla. You can buy it on Audible. It makes a great gift for someone. Have you listened to it, Mike Monte, yet? Have you listened to my audio?
I have not, but I will shortly.
All right, sure.
Mike himself does the narration, and very well.
With a female, there's a female voice too, so you don't just have to listen to me for 4 hours. There's a female voice.
That's good. Is it
sexy? And Mike, we do have I don't know how much we can say, but we do have a new show coming up on the network, right? That's coming up very soon with Nikita Breznikov.
Yes.
Great friend of the show. Great guy.
Hosted by Benny. What's the name of the show going to be, Benny?
It's going to be When It Was Real right now, unless we change it.
Nice. I'm very excited.
Yes.
try to rebuild this thing. And Monte and the Pharaoh on every Thursday. And
the flagship show.
Catch Monte and the Pharaoh on season 6 of Dark Side of the Ring, where we make an appearance through the Tony Atlas and the Billy Jack Haynes episodes. And Mike Messier, I don't know if Benny told you, you may be part of the Daphne episode. I don't have official word yet. So,
wow.
Yeah.
I feel like a slacker here.
Yeah, don't feel like it's like, but thanks again for the invite, guys, and thanks for a great show.
All right. Good night, guys, and thanks for sticking with us. Have a good night.
Oh, he tapped out. I was going to ask him about the Daphne thing.